Welcome again to this channel, where we honor the legacies of those who left us too soon. American sports have been shaped by extraordinary women, athletes who inspired millions with their passion, resilience, and determination. But some of these shining stars were taken from us far too early. Though they are no longer here, their impact remains, etched in the hearts of fans and in the history of the game. Today, we pay tribute to the remarkable women in American sports who left an unforgettable mark before their time was cut short. Florence Griffith Joyner, known to the world as Flo-Jo, was the fastest woman in history, a track and field legend whose records in the 100 meters and 200 meters still stand to this day. But behind the dazzling speed, the vibrant one-legged suits, and the long, flowing nails was a woman whose life was tragically cut short at just 38 years old. On September 21, 1998, the world woke up to the heartbreaking news. Flo-Jo had passed away in her sleep. The official cause was an epileptic seizure, but the circumstances of her death left many questions. She had been dealing with a congenital vascular abnormality, a condition that affected the blood vessels in her brain, which was later believed to have triggered the fatal seizure. In her final days, there was no public sign that anything was wrong. She was still active, involved in charity work, and even considering a return to competitive sports. But on that fateful night, while sleeping next to her husband Al Joyner, she suffered the seizure that took her life. Al woke up to find her unresponsive, and despite desperate efforts to revive her, she was gone. It was a devastating loss, not just for her family, but for the entire sports world. Flo-Jo had always been larger than life, breaking barriers, shattering records, and inspiring generations. Born in Los Angeles on December 21, 1959, she grew up in a struggling but hardworking family, the seventh of 11 children. From a young age, she had an unshakable drive, running in local track meets and winning youth competitions. By the time she reached high school, her talent was undeniable. She eventually attended UCLA, where she trained under legendary coach Bob Kersey. Her breakthrough came at the 1984 Olympics, where she won silver in the 200 meters, but it was in 1988 that she became a global sensation. At the U.S. Olympic trials, she ran an unbelievable 10.49 seconds in the 100 meters, so fast that to this day, no woman has legally come close. At the Seoul Olympics, she dominated, winning 3 gold medals and setting another world record in the 200 meters with 21.34 seconds. But just a year later, at the height of her fame, she shocked the world by retiring. She pursued other passions, fashion, acting, philanthropy, but she never truly left the public eye. However, her sudden rise to dominance had sparked whispers of performance-enhancing drugs. Despite never failing a drug test, accusations lingered, unfairly casting a shadow over her achievements. Yet those who knew her best, including her longtime coach and husband, always maintained that her speed was purely a result of her relentless work ethic and natural ability. After her death, her legacy remained untouchable. She was more than just a sprinter. She was a cultural icon, a woman who defied expectations, who showed that greatness could come with flair, elegance, and unapologetic individuality. Her records still stand, Her influence is still felt, and the sadness of her passing still lingers. Florence Griffith Joyner was not just the fastest woman ever, she was a force of nature, gone too soon, but never forgotten. Tori Bowie, a name that once echoed through Olympic stadiums, a woman whose speed on the track made her a champion, is now remembered with a heartbreaking silence that no one saw coming. She was more than just a sprinter. She was a warrior, a fighter, and an inspiration to so many. But behind the medals, the celebrations, and the triumphs, a tragedy was unfolding, one that would ultimately take her life far too soon. On April 23, 2023, at just 32 years old, Tori was found dead in her Florida home, alone, 8 months pregnant, having suffered complications from childbirth. Her daughter, a baby girl named Ariana, was stillborn. It was a devastating end to a life filled with so much promise, a painful reminder of the silent crisis in maternal health, particularly for Black women in the United States. The autopsy revealed she had suffered from eclampsia, a severe condition tied to high blood pressure during pregnancy that can cause seizures and respiratory distress. The thought of her struggling in those final hours, with no one there to help, is almost unbearable. How did this happen to someone so strong, so full of life? Tori had always been a fighter. Raised by her grandmother after being placed in foster care as a toddler, she learned early on that giving up was never an option. From her days dominating Mississippi high school track meets to her college years at the University of Southern Mississippi, she never backed down. She won NCAA championships in the long jump before shifting to sprints, where she would become one of the fastest women in the world. In 2016, she stood on the Olympic podium, draped in gold, silver, and bronze, after electrifying performances in Rio. The world knew her for her speed, for the way she flew down the track, for the fierce determination in her eyes. But as time passed, Tori began stepping away from the spotlight. Her races became less frequent, and eventually, she disappeared from the sport she once dominated. Friends and former teammates noticed, but didn't know the full story. And then, in May 2023, the news broke: Tori was gone. No one had heard from her for days before authorities found her body. The loneliness of her passing made it all the more painful. She had been carrying life, yet she lost her own. Her death became more than just a personal tragedy. It became a symbol of the crisis surrounding Black maternal health in the U.S., where Black women are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women. If someone as strong, as elite, as physically conditioned as Tori Bowie could succumb to this, what does that say about the system meant to protect mothers? This wasn't just an unfortunate accident. It was a reflection of a much larger problem. It's haunting to think that a woman who had outrun so many competitors, who had trained her body to its absolute peak, could not outrun this fate. The world lost a champion that day, not just in sports but in life. Tori Bowie's story was never supposed to end this way. She should have been celebrated for decades to come, watching her daughter grow, maybe even coaching the next generation of stars. Instead, we are left with memories, with videos of her victories, with the pain of what could have been. Her life was more than her tragic end, but her death will not be forgotten. It will be a wake-up call, a reminder that something must change. Rest in peace, Tori. You ran a race that so many admired, and though your finish line came too soon, your legacy will never fade. Pat Summitt was more than just a coach. She was a force, a relentless competitor who built an empire out of sheer determination and grit. But even the strongest among us are not immune to the cruel hands of fate. She dominated college basketball like no one else, securing 1,098 career wins and 8 NCAA championships with the Tennessee Lady Vols, leaving behind a legacy that seemed untouchable. But in 2011, everything changed. At just 59, she received a devastating diagnosis: early-onset Alzheimer's disease, an unrelenting thief that would slowly strip away the mind of a woman who had built her life on sharp instincts and an unbreakable will. The news sent shockwaves through the sports world. Pat, who had spent decades shaping young athletes, now found herself in a fight she couldn't coach her way out of. Even in the face of an illness that had no cure, she refused to back down, continuing to coach for another season before stepping down in 2012. She dedicated her final years to raising awareness and funding for Alzheimer's research, launching the Pat Summitt Foundation in the hope of sparing others from the same cruel fate. But as the disease progressed, the once commanding presence of the court was slowly taken from her. By 2016, she had been moved to a senior care facility in Knoxville, where she spent her last days surrounded by family, close friends, and the players she had mentored like daughters. On June 28, 2016, at just 64 years old, Pat Summitt passed away. Her battle with Alzheimer's finally over, leaving behind a sports world that felt emptier without her. Her death was a heartbreaking reminder that even the fiercest warriors can be brought to their knees by illness, but her legacy remains untouchable. Born Patricia Sue Head on June 14, 1952, in Clarksville, Tennessee, Pat grew up on a dairy farm, where she learned discipline and toughness from an early age. She first played basketball in a barn, battling her brothers for every point, a fire that carried her through high school and into college at the University of Tennessee Martin, where she became an All-American. At a time when women's basketball was still fighting for recognition, she helped put the sport on the map, winning a silver medal as a player in the 1976 Olympics before leading the U.S. team to gold as a coach in 1984. But it was at Tennessee where she cemented her name in history, taking over the Lady Vols at just 22 years old and transforming them into a dynasty. Known for her piercing stare and unwavering standards, she molded young women into champions, both on and off the court. She never had a losing season in 38 years, a testament to her brilliance and resilience. Even after her diagnosis, she remained an inspiration, facing her toughest opponent with the same determination she had always shown. Today, her name lives on, not just in record books, but in the Pat Summitt Alzheimer's Clinic, in the thousands of players and coaches she influenced, and in the hearts of fans who watched her change the game forever. Her story is not just one of triumph, but of tragedy, of a mind that once outwitted the best in the game, slowly fading away before the world's eyes. But even in death, Pat Summitt remains undefeated in spirit. Wilma Rudolph's story is one of triumph over adversity, but her journey, filled with determination and resilience, came to an end too soon when she was diagnosed with brain and throat cancer in July 1994. It was a cruel fate for a woman who had defied the odds so many times before. A woman who had once been told she might never walk again, but went on to become the fastest woman in the world. She spent her final months in Brentwood, Tennessee, as the disease took its toll on her body, stealing the strength that had once carried her to Olympic glory. On November 12, 1994, at just 54 years old, she passed away, surrounded by her loved ones, leaving behind a legacy that would inspire generations. Born prematurely in 1940, Wilma weighed only 4.5 pounds and faced an uphill battle from the start. As a child, she suffered from pneumonia, scarlet fever, and polio, which left her unable to walk without a brace. But her mother refused to accept that fate, taking Wilma on weekly trips to a hospital miles away for treatment and making sure her siblings helped her with daily therapy at home. By 12, she was walking without assistance, and by 16, she was running at the Olympics, winning a bronze medal in the 4x100-meter relay at the 1956 Games in Melbourne. But it was in 1960, at the Rome Olympics, where she made history, winning 3 gold medals in the 100 meters, 200 meters, and 4 multiplied by 100m relay, becoming the first American woman to achieve such a feat. She was a star, not just for her speed, but for her grace, her fight, and her refusal to be limited by the obstacles life threw at her. She retired from track at the peak of her career, choosing to focus on education, coaching, and inspiring young athletes. She remained a symbol of perseverance, breaking barriers for Black women in sports and using her fame to support the civil rights movement. But in the end, even the strongest fighters have battles they cannot win. Cancer spread quickly, and the woman who had once outrun the world found herself in a race she couldn't finish. Her death was a loss not just to sports, but to humanity, because Wilma Rudolph was more than an athlete. She was hope. She was proof that the impossible could be achieved. Even now, decades after her passing, her legacy lives on, reminding us that no matter how hard life gets, no matter how many odds are stacked against you, there is always a way forward. Alice Coachman was a trailblazer, a legend, and an inspiration. But in the final months of her life, she was battling a struggle no medal could fix. On July 14, 2014, at the age of 90, the first black woman to win an Olympic gold medal passed away in Georgia. She had suffered a stroke months earlier, a devastating blow that led to her being admitted to a nursing home, where her condition worsened. Her family watched as the once unstoppable high jumper, whose strength had carried her over every obstacle in life, now faced one she couldn't overcome. It was a heartbreaking end for a woman who had once soared higher than anyone thought possible, a woman who had fought through racism, segregation, and gender discrimination to etch her name in history. Born on November 9, 1923, in Albany, Georgia, Alice Coachman grew up in a time and place where being both black and a female athlete meant facing closed doors at every turn. But nothing could keep her down. Denied access to proper training facilities, she ran barefoot on dirt roads, used homemade equipment, and jumped over anything she could find. Her raw talent couldn't be ignored for long. By the time she was 16, she had already broken national high school and college records, all while competing barefoot. She dominated the Amateur Athletic Union Championships for a decade, winning 10 straight national high jump titles. But because of World War II, the Olympics were canceled in 1940 and 1944, robbing her of what could have been her prime years on the world stage. But in 1948, the world finally got to see what she was capable of. At the London Olympics, despite dealing with a back injury, she cleared 5 feet 6 1/8 inches on her very first attempt, setting a record and becoming the first black woman to win Olympic gold. King George VI himself awarded her the medal. She returned to the US as a hero, but racism still loomed large. Her hometown honored her with a parade, but at the official ceremony, she wasn't even allowed to speak, and the mayor refused to shake her hand. Still, she had broken barriers that could never be rebuilt. After retiring, she continued to uplift others, becoming a teacher and mentor for young athletes while also creating the Alice Coachman Track and Field Foundation to help struggling Olympic veterans. She even became the first black woman to secure an international endorsement deal, appearing in Coca-Cola ads alongside Jesse Owens. Alice Coachman's impact stretched far beyond her own achievements. She paved the way for future track and field stars like Florence Griffith Joyner and Jackie Joyner-Kersee. But in her final moments, it wasn't medals or records that mattered. It was the legacy she left behind, the doors she kicked open, and the countless lives she inspired. She passed away quietly, but the mark she left on the world will never fade. Alice Coachman didn't just break records, she shattered limitations, proving that no barrier, no rule, no prejudice could keep her from flying. Andrea Mead Lawrence was a trailblazer, a force of nature both on the slopes and in the fight to protect them. But even the strongest spirits are not invincible to time. She passed away on March 30th, 2009, after battling leiomyosarcoma, a rare and aggressive form of cancer. It was a cruel fate for someone who had spent her life defying the odds, carving through icy mountain slopes with precision, and later battling for the preservation of the landscapes she so deeply loved. Her final years were spent in Mammoth Lakes, California, where she had made a home for herself and her 5 children after a life filled with both triumph and challenge. Her fight against cancer lasted nearly a decade, a testament to the same resilience that had once made her an Olympic champion. Born in Rutland, Vermont, on April 19, 1932, Andrea was practically raised on skis, with her family owning the Pico Peak Ski Resort. By 14, she was already on the U.S. national team, and by 15, She was competing in her first Olympics in 1948. She didn't win a medal that year, but her fire had been lit, and she returned in 1952 to cement her name in history. At just 19, she stunned the world by becoming the first American alpine skier to win 2 gold medals in a single Olympics, dominating the slalom and giant slalom in Oslo, Norway. But Andrea's life wasn't just about skiing. She married fellow skier David Lawrence, had 5 children, and after stepping away from competition, poured her energy into environmental activism. She fought tirelessly to protect Mono Lake and the Sierra Nevada mountains, founding the Andrea Lawrence Institute for Mountains and Rivers in 2003. Her impact extended beyond the slopes, beyond the activism. She became a symbol of endurance, a woman who never backed down from a challenge. Even in her final years, as cancer took hold, she remained a fighter, facing her illness with the same determination she had shown throughout her life. In her honor, a 12,240-foot peak in California was named Mount Andrea Lawrence, a lasting tribute to a woman who had conquered mountains in more ways than one. Ann Mara, known as the First Lady of Football, was a woman whose influence stretched far beyond her title, deeply woven into the fabric of the New York Giants and the NFL itself. But her story took a heartbreaking turn in her final days. She was in good health until a cruel twist of fate changed everything. On a cold January morning in 2015, she stepped outside her home to fetch the newspaper, something her housekeeper usually did. But that day, Ann did it herself. The ice was invisible, the fall was sudden, and the impact was severe. She suffered a head injury and was rushed to the hospital, where at first, there was hope. Her family clung to it, thinking she might recover. But complications set in, and within 2 weeks, pneumonia took hold, and she was gone. It was a devastating loss, not just for her children and grandchildren, but for an entire football community that saw her as the heart and soul of the Giants. She passed away at 85, surrounded by her family, all 11 of her children and their spouses, and countless grandchildren who adored her. Born Anne Maria Theresa Mumm on June 18, 1929, in Manhattan, she was of German, French-Canadian, and Irish descent, a woman of strong Catholic faith, a devoted wife to Wellington Mara, the legendary owner of the Giants, and the mother of a dynasty that carried on their family's football legacy. Her life was one of love, strength, and fierce loyalty to her team, to her family, and to the values she held dear. She met Wellington in 1952 under the most ordinary yet fateful circumstances, at a 7:30 a.m. Mass, when an elderly woman fainted, and both Anne and Wellington rushed to help. That moment sparked a love story that lasted over 5 decades, filled with football games, family traditions, and a bond that endured even after Wellington's passing in 2005. She never let her husband's legacy fade. She embraced it, becoming a force in the Giants organization, attending nearly every game for 60 years, home and away, and standing firm in her love for the team. She was more than a spectator. She was a warrior for the franchise, famously confronting Hall of Fame quarterback Terry Bradshaw in 2012 for never picking the Giants to win. That moment turned her into an internet sensation, but for those who knew her, it was just Anne being Anne, fiercely loyal, unafraid to speak her mind, and full of passion for the game she loved. She was also a woman of immense generosity, giving to charities, supporting Catholic education, and helping children in need through her philanthropy. But in the end, it was a simple, tragic accident that took her life. One misstep on the ice, a moment that changed everything. Her passing was honored with a moment of silence during Super Bowl XLIX, and for the following season, the Giants wore a patch on their jerseys with her initials, ETM, a constant reminder that she was still with them, watching over the team she loved so much. Anne Mara's story is one of love, resilience, and heartbreak, a life that touched so many and ended far too soon. leaving behind a legacy that will never be forgotten. Flo-Jo, a legendary basketball coach and an icon in women's sports, left behind a legacy that goes far beyond the court. She was the heart and soul of the NC State Wolfpack women's basketball team for over 3 decades, amassing more than 700 wins, leading her team to multiple NCAA tournaments, and even coaching the U.S. women's basketball team to Olympic gold in 1988. But beyond her coaching accolades, Flo-Jo became a symbol of strength and resilience in the face of adversity. Her battle with breast cancer began in 1987, a fight that would span over 2 decades, challenging her physically and emotionally but never breaking her spirit. She refused to let the disease define her, continuing to coach with unwavering passion and inspiring countless athletes along the way. Even as her health declined, she remained on the sidelines, pushing through exhaustion and pain, determined to be there for her team. In 2007, as her cancer aggressively returned, she took a brief leave of absence, but made a heroic comeback, guiding her team to victory in what would be her 700th career win. That same night, the court at Reynolds Coliseum was renamed in her honor, a testament to her impact on the game and the people she touched. Despite undergoing treatments and facing relentless challenges, she continued to coach until early 2009, when the disease finally forced her to step away. Her final days were spent in Cary, North Carolina, surrounded by loved ones and the unwavering support of her players, colleagues, and fans. She passed away on January 24, 2009, at the age of 66, losing her long battle with stage 4 breast cancer. But even in death, Flo-Jo's influence did not fade. She had already built something bigger than basketball. Her legacy lived on through the Flo-Jo Cancer Fund, an initiative she founded to support cancer research and provide hope to others fighting similar battles. She had planned her own funeral, even recording a message for those who would gather to remember her, ensuring her final words would be a reflection of the life she lived. Over 1,400 people attended her service, a heartbreaking but powerful testament to the number of lives she touched. She once said, "We can't control what happens to us in life, but we have 100% control of how we will respond to it." And that's exactly how she lived, never as a victim, but as a fighter, a mentor, and a beacon of hope. Her faith, her resilience, and her love for the game carried her through the darkest moments. And in turn, she carried countless others, proving that true strength isn't just about victories. It's about the courage to keep going, no matter the odds. Flo-Jo wasn't just a coach. She was a warrior, and her legacy will forever remain a guiding light for those who dare to dream and fight with all they have. Their journeys may have ended, but their legacies continue to inspire generations. These women prove that true greatness isn't measured by time, but by the impact they leave behind. Gone, but never forgotten.